Weekly Challenge. We're going to be learning about a very famous artist by the name of Henri Matisse. And here he is. He was very sick later in his old age, and he got around in a wheelchair, which meant that he couldn't go outside and paint and use paintbrushes normally to paint. So instead of making paintings, he decided, what's another way of making art? And he decided to use scissors to make his artwork. And he coined the phrase painting with scissors. So here you can see a picture of him cutting some interesting shapes out with scissors. And he lived from the year 1869 to 1954. That's a long time ago. That's nearly 100 years ago. And he lived in the country, France. I wonder if any of you have been to France. Now, one of the examples of his artworks we're going to show you is called The Parakeet and the Mermaid, and it was painted in 1952. Now you can see the shapes that he made in this artwork are very interesting. These are the kinds of shapes we're going to be looking at today. I wonder what they remind you of. Do they remind you of a mermaid in some way, or a parakeet? I wonder if you look closely at these shapes, you might see what Henri Matisse was thinking. Now, here are some more examples of some of his artworks hanging up in a gallery. You can see that Henri Matisse made many of these artworks, and he coined the phrase cutouts. And you can see some spirals and some more interesting wavy shapes that we're going to be learning about today. He was also inspired by the sea, because he travelled a lot around the world and was very interested in sea creatures and sea life. And you can see in this artwork here how he's used shapes that remind him of things that he saw, like sea cucumbers and seaweed or starfish, things that you might find under the ocean. And he made over 270 of these cutouts in his life. Pretty amazing. Now today we're also going to be learning how to make a collage. A collage is a technique that has been around for many hundreds of years, and it was made first in France, where artists would cut out shapes or use different materials to stick on a surface. So it involves lots of glue and sticking down and patting different materials onto a surface. Maybe you could find objects at home that you have used in a collage before. Now, if you're wondering what kind of shapes we're going to be using today, we're going to need to make shapes that maybe you haven't thought of before. These sorts of shapes here are called free-form shapes, and they're very different to geometric shapes. Can you see why? If you look closely, the geometric shapes have very precise edges. They're usually very straight or have been very carefully made. They're very man-made kinds of shapes. Often we recognise them like triangles and squares and circles and stars, arrows, semicircles. These are all geometric and man-made shapes. On the other side, we have free-form shapes. You might think of shapes that are very wavy and swirly and curvy, things that you see in nature. I wonder if any of these shapes remind you of things you see in nature. Maybe a snail shell, maybe a leaf, maybe a puddle or a cloud. There's lots of shapes that have very curved and rounded edges that remind us of things in nature. Today, we're going to look at some of these shapes in nature to inspire us. So maybe things under the ocean, like Henri Matisse was inspired. We can see some things like our starfish, our coral, and our sea plants, maybe even the fish shapes. We also have leaves in the forest. Maybe when you're walking out and about in the garden, you might see lots of free-form shapes. Things like these succulent plants. They're a bit like cactus. They have very interesting, wavy and curvy kinds of edges on those shapes. So they're all found in nature. And I wanted to show you as well some examples of some interesting things that have been made by other people, inspired by our artist Matisse. So you can see we even have a doona cover, a rug, and a student's artwork where they have used free-form shapes to make interesting designs and artworks. Wow! Now would you like to make one? Before we do, let's have a look at our scissors. Now remember, scissors are the tool of the week. We're not going to be using paintbrushes, but scissors instead to make our artwork, just like Henri Matisse. And the scissors are a tool that we are going to use both hands with to do our cutting. We're going to learn some cutting skills together before we begin. Are you ready? Okay, so materials we're going to need for this lesson is a lot of different types of coloured paper. Maybe at home you've got coloured paper, you can paint some special paper, you've got wrapping paper or paper with patterns on it, or maybe even some beautiful magazine pictures you might want to cut out. And of course we need our tool of the week, our scissors. Now over here, you'll notice I've already been cutting out some different shapes, some free-form shapes. Let's have a look at some of them. This one, it took me the longest. You can see there's a lot of curvy, swirly kinds of movements I've had to make. And I wonder what it reminds you of, something in nature. Perhaps something under the water. It might be seaweed. It could be something crawling across the ground like a giant millipede in the rainforest. Maybe it could be something like a leaf hanging from a tree. And over here we have a very splatty kind of shape. It reminds us a little bit of a puddle or something else we might find under the ocean. Maybe it's a starfish. I wonder. Over here I've made some wavy kinds of shapes, a bit like the ocean. Or maybe it's a snake or a worm slithering in the jungle. And here I've made a spiral shape. It reminds me of something like a shell. Perhaps it could be another creature coiled up. So there's lots of shapes that you can make today, made by drawing with scissors, as Henri Matisse would say. Now there are many benefits for using scissors and learning to cut with scissors. Number one, we're going to be working on those fine motor skills, and we're also going to be using two hands at once. That's called using our bilateral coordination. So by using one hand as a steering wheel and the other hand for cutting, I'm going to show you some cutting skills. Okay, so you might want to try cutting a number of shapes that are the same at once. If you want to do that, you can actually fold your piece of paper in half, or even 2 times if you want to make more than one shape at the same time. Now remember, you're going to be holding the piece of paper that you're cutting with the hand that you don't cut with. Now I'm a left-hander, so I'm going to hold my piece of paper in my right hand, and then picking up my scissors, keeping that thumb on top and those other fingers underneath, we're going to open our scissors up like a crocodile, and we're going to use the V part of the scissors. So this is the corner. So normally when we think of cutting, we might cut with the ends of our scissors, but we're going to use this part. So we need to start at one end of the paper and think about opening those scissors up nice and wide. So we push that paper into the V. Now keeping your fingers pretty close so you can control that paper. You can see how I can turn that side to side like a steering wheel. I'm then going to make some little cuts by opening and closing, not all the way. So can you see that? I'm just making little tiny movements and cuts while I move and turn at the same time. I'm going to move and turn that piece of paper around. So I'm not going to actually draw any of my shapes onto the paper first, because Henri Matisse didn't draw his shapes. He made them up as he went along. So he imagined what kind of path he would make with those scissors, and he would just keep turning. So not just turning the scissors, but turning the paper. Now you can see I've come to a point there where it gets a little bit hard to move my scissors through. So I might need to bring them back over the top and then keep moving. Now, if I get stuck, you can always trim a bit off, like so, and then come back again and move that piece of paper around and snip. Now you can see I've actually made 4 freeform shapes, and I can use as many as I like. Now you can try doing spirals by going around in a big circle, and if you like you can cut by turning it back one way or the other way, whatever's easier. So we've got a circle. Now I've already made 2 circles there, you might even use just a circle. And then by cutting inwards, like so, turn it around and keep going around and around and around and around, and you get almost to the middle, and then we're going to turn it back again. So, just going back between the lines you have just cut. This is the tricky part. So for some of you older kids out there, you can actually cut in between very carefully. I might come back from this area and cut between those 2 cuts I have just made. So I've got a little bit of space and I can pull that out. It's like a spring, isn't it? And I can cut this little bit off here. So I've made a bit of a spiral shape there. So you can be as tricky as you like by turning one hand like a steering wheel, and remember to open and close those scissors and use the V part of the scissors when you're cutting, making little snips. So we're not opening and closing, we're doing little snips. All right, let's have a try. Now that everyone has been making their artworks and have learnt all the knowledge and skills, let's have a look at our call for action this week. So we would like you to send us a 1-minute video clip after you have finished your artwork, and make sure that you think about your ideas, because we would like you to consider talking about your new skills and creative ideas behind your artwork. Parents, you can encourage your kids to answer any of the following questions, maybe just 1 or 2 or all of them, it's up to you. And here are just some examples of types of questions you might prompt your kids with. So, what artist did you learn about today? What materials and techniques did you apply? What do your freeform shapes remind you of from nature? And can you tell us about the challenges you had while cutting? Oh, okay, so if you do manage to finish your artwork and or your video clip, one or the other, we would like you to then please post us the photos and or video of your artwork to Facebook or Instagram to enter our weekly lucky draw. And so we're going to be doing that every week. And so if you do that, make sure you use the hashtag and Abracadoodle Australia and hashtag Splatdoodle. So we look forward to seeing what you guys come up with, and we'll see you all next week.